So Beth, as you get older, I know that more and more people I know about have another condition of some kind, and they'll be taking maybe something for blood pressure, and maybe they might be focusing on losing weight and their salt intake, but not necessarily on their alcohol. I think there's so much information on a leaflet with medication that often we don't read it and take it in. I think there's also this thing about trusting your GP, isn't there, and trusting that medical person. And did they ask you those questions about whether you were drinking at the time you were issued the medication?
And often I think the case is that they don't ask you that, and certainly a lot of my work is around making sure that primary care practitioners are supported to be able to help older adults understand their drinking and how it might be impacting their health in the context of everything else that's going on for them, like the conditions and the medications that they might be taking. It's actually the pharmacists that tend to be most in the know about this, but I think a lot of older adults don't have much in-depth contact with their pharmacist.
I think you're right there, and I think they do rely on their GPs. So I think there you come down to the role of the specialists and the GPs in how do they talk to people when they come into the surgery about what they're doing in terms of their lifestyle choices.
Well, certainly it factors into the healthy living reviews that we get for the over 55s, but often. So they're using a tool that's not specific to older adults, so the Audit C, so that assesses alcohol intake on a level that for the population might be considered lower risk. But also when we're responding to those kinds of questions, lots of us don't actually recognise how much alcohol we're drinking. They often ask us about how many units we're having and how many drinks we're having. How many units are in the drinks that we have varies greatly by drink and also by how much we're pouring for ourselves.
Absolutely. So I remember, it was about 4 years ago now, I decided to get one of those little measures from Drinkaware. And I thought that would be really, really useful. And I have to say, I thought to myself, well, I thought a unit of gin was a lot more than it is.
Yes.
So, it was a real learning curve. It's the point at which you say to yourself, I've changed my habits, and your self-awareness is really important. And I think that's, again, where maybe if other health practitioners had time to have that lifestyle conversation, people might show more self-awareness.
Absolutely. And trying to think about alcohol, as a lifestyle behaviour rather than as a problem, I think can be quite important. Something that works really well with the older age group is drink diaries, where they record how much they're drinking on a day-to-day basis. And that's certainly something that GPs that I've worked with have been implementing as well. And people are often very surprised by how much they're drinking across the course of a week. Because when we're thinking about harmful drinking in the older age group, often it can look very, very benign. It wouldn't be something that we would think about and would alert to a nurse who's doing a health screening as problem drinking, but it can be harmful to our bodies, and often we don't notice that harm until it's happened.
Yes, I think a lot of women, correct me if I'm wrong, will probably think in terms of alcohol and weight gain.
Yeah.
But not necessarily all the other changes that are so important, that lead to other medical problems, including, a stroke or something far more significant. So I remember sort of talking to my friends, we were talking about things like, I'm worried about my weight gain and probably that will influence me a little bit more in reducing my alcohol. Isn't that interesting? So I think we do think to ourselves, how do I look? But that isn't the same as what's going on inside and what's happening within you. And I think that's the bit that people don't understand and don't see.
I mean, but the effect of alcohol on weight is a really, really helpful tool when we're working with the older age group around drinking, because obviously weight is a bit more difficult to manage as you get older, and the calories from alcohol can be really impactful, and it's something that has quite a tangible and immediate impact on our bodies. So whilst we might not be noticing the development of alcohol related diseases because they're just happening in the background, our weight is something that we can see and can change in quite a relatively quick time period in comparison. At Drinkwise Age Well, when we were doing outreach, work to help people in the community understand their alcohol intake. Weight was something that they really drew upon to encourage older adults to make healthier choices in their drinking. So on the unit wheel that we used to use to help them understand how much they were taking in, it also included calories, and we talk about the kind of things that they could be having instead. So for example, if they were drinking a bottle of wine, would you be having 3 donuts on an evening? Was quite a powerful thing to say to people, because lots of people wouldn't want to have 3 donuts on an evening. I mean, I would, but but lots of people would be quite staggered by the calorie content of the bottle of wine.
But I can see what you mean about that, because I wouldn't dream of eating 3 donuts. I wouldn't. I don't eat 1, but so I certainly wouldn't consider 3. So I think that sugar content is really interesting and a powerful tool.
And it's interesting, because alcohol, I guess, lots of people see it as a food or a drink, and every other type of food or drink, they have to have all the nutritional information on the box or on the bottle. But that's not something that's happened with alcohol yet. When it has such a high sugar content and such a high calorie content that people aren't aware about.
Do you know, you've raised a really important point, because I was doing a Change for Life session. It was last year or the year before now, and we were talking about how many cubes of sugar there were in those added drinks that you put, a syrup that you put with your coffee. 14 to 16 cubes of sugar.
Oh my
so it's
goodness.
the same sort of idea. Now,
Yeah.
as soon as you were told that, you wouldn't dream of taking one of those syrups.
Yeah.
So why do we know about that with a syrup, but we don't know about it with alcohol? Really interesting, isn't it? What public health messages, A, we get, but B, we internalise?
Yeah, absolutely. I think around the public health campaigns in England, there's some issues around that. The politicians are often very heavily influenced by alcohol lobbying. They have a lot of money to lobby against certain measures that they might take, so they don't tend to do a huge amount of alcohol campaigning and hardcore recommendations around alcohol.
And if you compare that with smoking, smoking, of course, has taken a long time to be taken off all the sports boards, all of those pitches where we used to get smoking banners and that sort of thing. So it's taken years and years and years. And now they sell it with a big white banner that says this is going to cause you harm.
Yes. I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoy alcohol, and I just think it's really important to be self-aware about what you're putting into your body and try and do it as healthily as possible.
I think one of the interesting things is I can remember on the bookshelves of my parents something by Dr. Christian Barnard, and in there he talks about having a glass of red wine and saying that was really good for your heart. And so, lots of people had that book and believed in what they read at that time. So now we're talking about generations later, but they've picked up some of those habits and they've learnt some of that. I've learnt that piece of information because it was on my parents' bookshelf. So I think there is something about those mixed messages around, should we drink? How much is safe? Is it safe at all to drink? That we need to sort of get to the bottom of.
In my research around the health and psychosocial factors affecting older people's alcohol use, those mixed health messages were really problematic for them. Not just necessarily in the way of following those previous messages around the health benefits of drinking, but also just around that complete bombardment of different health messages. 1 minute they're saying this, next minute they're saying that. You've also got all the messages around different foods, like whether or not salmon and eggs are good for you. And some of them were just getting to the point where it was like, I'll just do my own thing. Like, these health messages are always going to change. I'll just do what I feel like doing. And often what we feel like doing and what is perceived to be normal can actually be a harmful level of alcohol intake for us, especially when we don't have that self-awareness around what we're putting in our bodies.
I mean, I'm trying to think when alcohol and driving were absolutely banned, but it must be 2 decades now since that became a norm. That's really clear, finally, public health messaging. Whereas as what we're talking about is through the decades, very different messaging, where people pick and choose.
I think there does need to be a lot more awareness around that. And certainly with the driving, Drinkwise Age Well did a fantastic campaign in Ireland around, particularly amongst the older age group, because you've got that reduced tolerance to alcohol, you process it less efficiently, less quickly as you get older. So you need to be even more cautious about how much you're drinking when you're driving.
I think we need some of that hard-hitting public in-the-face stuff to make us start saying to ourselves, alcohol actually is causing us harm and will decrease our life expectancy.
It's interesting you say that, because I do think people aren't aware enough of the negative consequences of our drinking, and like how, you know, what problematic drinking, what harmful drinking can look like, because it can be a lot less alcohol intake than we think about. But work that I've done with older adults suggests that what we really need to be doing to encourage people to make healthier choices is highlighting the benefits that you can have from reducing your drinking rather than the harms of continuing your drinking. So, for example, highlighting how it could help with managing your weight, highlighting how it could help you have a better quality of life, help with particular difficulties. I mean, there was an example around somebody who had arthritis and their weight was really affecting their arthritis and their mobility, and as part of managing their arthritis they reduce their drinking, and it's just kind of highlighting the health benefits on an individual basis, which can be done in those primary care settings.
And I do think these health checks that have come and gone from successive governments are really important, because that lifestyle conversation could really make a difference to what people do in the future.
Absolutely. And they're starting to integrate them into those pharmacy settings as well. So people who have medication reviews for healthy living pharmacies, they have quite an in-depth conversation about their alcohol use. And I think the work of pharmacists around this is really, really great, but I just don't think that it's reaching enough older adults.
I'm just wondering whether employers could do more around this side of things, and whether they could, I mean, certainly through the city council, I get sent for a health check. I mean, it's my choice, I say send, but you know, I have the option and I nearly always take it up because I think, well, why wouldn't I get that sort of objective view of how I'm living my life? So I think there's also a really interesting thing about partners and carers and what they notice about the change in somebody's behaviour as a result of alcohol. Did you pick up anything about that, and whether carers were noticing things that perhaps the person wasn't noticing at all?
So if we, are you talking about in terms of like the home care providers kind of thing, or just people who they live with?
I think people they live with, but I mean home care providers, you know, domiciliary care workers could pick it up, I suppose. But actually the rota is such that most people don't get that regular person going through the door.
Yeah, I think it can be very mixed. I mean, you've always got the accounts that people have about their nagging partner kind of thing, and them keeping tabs on how much they're drinking. But when we're thinking about people whose drinking might have escalated and they're recognising their drinking might have become a bit more problematic to them, often they hide it quite well. It was interesting what you were saying about work in kind of working with employers as well, and that was something that they did at Drinkwise, was a lot of outreach work, trying to go in and educate people within their work settings and just make it a part of looking after ourselves rather than highlighting problem drinking. But it's particularly important when we're thinking about retirement as part of employment, and retirement can be quite a key trigger for increased drinking in older adults, because responsibilities in our lives are taken away. We have more time in our day where we can count it as leisure time, and therefore we're able to drink more. We could have a drink in the evening, or we might not have done before because we had work the next day. So it can, alcohol consumption can really increase after retirement. So if you can catch people while they're still in their jobs, make them more self-aware of what they're putting in their bodies, then you can potentially prevent that.
So that's a really nice note to end it on.
Thank you.